Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Sunday webinars. I can see some of you are not on mute, so please mute yourself. We are gonna start with few netiquette, so thank you for your patience. So please consider we are gonna be live on YouTube on the D71 channel. So if you want to rewatch the session, feel free to do so. It's not too late to promote with your friends and your relatives. Please ensure that you are on mute all the time. Thank you. We are gonna have a question and answer session. If you have any question, please send a private text to Steve Campion. You can see him under Steve Campion. And if you need to leave the room, or if a child, dog, or spouse interrupts you, please turn off your video for us, okay? Thank you. If you're using an iPhone or an iPad, please put it on a stable surface. Thank you. And most importantly, enjoy our session and enjoy our super special guest. Before that, it's my huge honor to give you our district director. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only District 71 District Director, Gerard Mannix. The stage is yours.
Hi, Guy. Thank you so much indeed. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all a very happy and safe 2021. Indeed, it's a new year, a new beginning, new challenges, yet new opportunities. So let us all renew our Toastmaster promise. We are fast approaching contest time, so this is a very apt time to have our guest, Aaron Beverly, here with us today. And I am so excited to hear his creation for a commendable presentation. Recently, I read something. If you want to excel in speech contests and become a better communicator, then keep reading How to Learn to Craft a Memorable Speech, command a room, and connect with your audience. Without further ado, I hand you over to our Public Relations Manager, Elizabeth Jordan, to introduce Mr. Beverly. Elizabeth, over to you, please.
Mr. District Director, fellow Toastmasters and guests from... Can you all hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. Excellent, let's start again. Mr. District Director, members of DLT, fellow Toastmasters and guests from around the world, it's a real honor and privilege to be introducing our special guest. I first came across him in 2016 when he was given a speech at the World Championship of Public Speaking. And you may recall his title, I think, was 57 words long. That year he came second. And I knew by the content of that speech, I was looking at a winner. And I have been following him ever since and was determined to get him to District 71. So Aaron, you are greatly welcome to our district. He doesn't need a massive introduction because in 2019, he scooped the accolade of being the 2019 World Champion of Public Speaking. And Aaron is so much more than that. He is champion, he's storyteller, he is world traveler, he is public speaker, keynote speaker, the list is endless. But what is fascinating about him is if you have a conversation, he will tell you that he's one of the world's most introverted people. But despite that, he has worked hard, diligently, he has benefited from mentors and so on. And as you can see, it's taken him to the accolade of being world champion. And tonight, we have the privilege of hearing about that process, how he did that. His speech is entitled The Process. And we are absolutely delighted to welcome you. So let's give Aaron a D71 hearty welcome by jazz hands or wave of hands, and then over to you, Aaron, with a speech entitled The Process. The stage is yours, Aaron.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, fellow Toastmasters and guests. District 71, it is my pleasure to be speaking before you. I am upset that maybe we couldn't do this in person, but 2021 is going to be a much better year. We are going to just say that outright. And who knows, one day we will be seeing each other in person once again. But as Gerard said, it is contest season for Toastmasters all around the world. Every single year, 30,000 people all around the world decide that they want to throw their hat into the gauntlet. They want to compete to become the world champion of public speaking. This is not a feat that should be underestimated, and it is not for the faint of heart. In the International Speech Contest, you will literally get in front of people to speak whose job is to literally judge what you say, how you say it, how your body language displays it, and if it is effectively valuable or not. I started competing in the International Speech Contest in 2012. When I competed in 2012, I dominated the competition in my club because I was the only competitor, but still, I thought that my wave of dominance was just going to ride over the contest. I was going to dominate every single round. I was going to become the world champion of public speaking in 2012. So you can imagine my surprise when I was called as second place in round 2, the area level. Afterwards, there was a gentleman who came up to me and he said, "Do you want to know why you lost?" Keep in mind that if you are a competitor in a speech contest, the last thing that you want to hear is, "Do you want to know why you lost?" But luckily for that gentleman and for me, I maintained my composure and I said, "Sure, tell me." But what he told me that day was that, "Aaron, you need to concentrate on building a better story." Basically, you had all sizzle and no steak. You were style and no substance. You have to work on your storytelling. You have to work on building a proper speech. That started me down the path of looking for people who could teach me how to fundamentally tell a better story and fundamentally how to build a better speech. In 2013, I decided to reach out to the person who introduced me to Toastmasters, a person who had more experience than I did. His name is Dilip Abesekara. And if you've been in Toastmasters long enough, that name probably sounds familiar because Dilip Abesekara was the 2005-2006 president of Toastmasters International, who just so happened to be an adjunct professor at my college. I also found out that he was a competitor in the 1992 World Championship of Public Speaking. By simply following his guidelines, following his lessons, I went from not being able to get out of round 2, the area level, to making it all the way to the 5th round, which is the semifinals of the World Championship of Public Speaking in 2013. Afterwards, I started to journey out on my own once I learned the fundamentals. I did not want to go to Dilip every single time I wanted to participate in the speech contest. I started to build a process of my own. And this is the process that I started to create. It took years to refine it. And to this day, it is still being refined. You'll see as I go down the list that I have included some steps. So maybe if you are a person who has heard this presentation before, it may be a little bit different from the last time you heard it. One lesson that I always want to stress to anybody who ever listens to me speak: your journey is never over. You can always find some way to grow. You can always find something to improve upon. My speeches, even though they won the World Championship of Public Speaking, I will look at them and I will say, you know what? I think I could have delivered that a little bit differently. I think I could have improved that line a little bit more. I should have paused just a little bit there so that I could extend that laughter. The process is never complete. Your journey is never complete. So never look at this process and say, okay, if I follow each of these steps, that's it. There's nothing else that I need to do. There's always something that you can possibly do. You're always striving for perfection, even though you know perfect may not always be possible. With that being said, before I dive into the process, I do want to establish some rules of my own. On top of everything that we heard before, I also want to add that be prepared to participate. I will be talking to you, yes, but I expect you to be talking to me a little bit. So every so often, I may ask you to enter something in the chat. It will be a simple response, a yes or a no, or a simple sentence. That will be fine, but just be prepared to participate. Number 2, take notes. One thing that you will notice as I give my presentation, or maybe you've seen me in the past give a presentation, you will notice that I will very rarely use a PowerPoint slide because I am a firm believer that if you write something down, it becomes more memorable. Therefore, make sure that you take down notes. I will do my best to repeat certain steps, make sure that I repeat certain critical points, but just make sure you have your pencil handy, make sure you have your pen handy, or just make sure that your fingers are at the ready to type some notes. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, let's have fun, because when you're having fun, that is when you learn the best. If you're not having fun, what's the point of learning? All right, so let's test out that one of those steps. Yes or no, ladies and gentlemen, are we ready to jump into the process? All right, I see the comments coming in. So with that being said, let's dive in. Step number 1 of this 11-step process to building a better speech. This is what I call the golden step. KYA. A little bit more participation. Anybody want to take a guess as to what KYA stands for? I'm pretty sure you may have heard it before. Boom. First one, Carl, congratulations.
Know your audience.
Know your audience. Yes. KYA, know your audience. This is the golden rule. And I think this is one of the biggest benefits of Toastmasters. It puts you in a situation where you have to know what your audience will value. It's great that you can have a speech that, oh man, I love this story. My family loves this story, but your family isn't this Toastmasters audience. You don't want to give a speech that is just for you to someone else. You want to give a speech that is going to be for them. Make sure that you're telling a story that will be relatable for them, that will be understandable for them. One thing that I will always teach about creating your stories is that you have to have 2 C's, character and conflict. But it's not just enough to have a character and conflict. You have to have a character that the audience can relate to, and you have to have a conflict that is understandable to them. That's just an extra. That's not a part of the process itself. But you can bomb a speech. You can totally proverbially shoot yourself in the foot before you even say a word, all because you didn't take the time to know your audience. Now, what are some ways that you can get to know your audience a little bit better? Well, the simplest action is to talk to them directly. You can talk to them before you speak. If you are a professional speaker, one thing that I will do, I will make sure that I mingle in the audience just for a few minutes, just to get an idea of what the people in that audience are looking for. Of course, before that, I will do my research on that audience. I will see what type of speakers have spoken to them in the past. I will reach out to any speakers that I personally know to get some advice. Perfect example of this is when I went to Dubai, I never spoke to an audience that was from Dubai before. I wasn't sure what I could say or what I shouldn't say. I reached out to the 2015 world champion of public speaking, Muhammad Katani, who is from Dubai, who knows that audience. And he assured me that anything that I could tell in the United States, I will be able to tell in Dubai. So if you have someone that you know that has spoken to that type of audience before, use their knowledge. You can also use your past experiences. If you have been a Toastmaster for a long time, you probably understand how Toastmasters think. You probably know the type of content they think is valuable. One thing that I will say is that every single speech that I have seen win the World Championship of Public Speaking, every single contender in the International Speech Contest, every single prominent professional public speaker relies on storytelling. Therefore, you should definitely learn how to tell a story that can be shared with your audience. But getting back to the first step, KYA, know your audience. It's the golden rule for a very important reason. The next step, number 2, this is one that I actually recently added. It's something that I just always naturally did, but never really told people about, never really expressed it in this speech before. And that is brainstorm your topic. A lot of times we already have the topic in mind. If you are at work, you already know what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about your specific job. You're going to talk about the specific project that you're working on. The topic is basically dictated to you. But in the context of a contest, you have the creative will. You can make any type of speech that you want to make. Therefore, it can be a little bit tough to come up with a topic. Therefore, don't put as much stress on yourself. Always think about what you can write and then just write it down. There are many ways that you can brainstorm. One of my favorite ways is to use my cell phone. I will open up a transcribing application. The one that I use is called Speechy, and I'll just type that in. And basically, I will just start talking and rambling as it transcribes every single word that I say. This is a great way just to brainstorm and get some ideas flowing. And then you review what you talked about, and maybe you can piece out some great nuggets that you can put into a speech. Something else that you can do is to peruse any stories that you have told in the past. I keep a story file, meaning that I will write down a story and I will store it on my computer. Other people use notebooks because they feel better with writing things out physically. That's perfectly fine. But review your story file, and maybe you can just put it on the placeholder of potential content. But this is a great way to just think about ideas and topics of what you want to talk about. So brainstorm your topic is number 2. Now, we get to another critical step. You'll hear other champions talk about it, you'll hear other speakers talk about it, and they call it different things, but I call mine detox. DTOKS. DTOKS. You're going to answer a question. What do you want the audience to do, think, or know by the time you are done speaking? I call it my do, think, or know summary, or detox for short. Now, there are other things that you can call it. Some people are familiar with do, think, or feel. If you have heard other champions in the past, I say do, think, or know, because honestly, detox sounds just so much better than saying detox. It doesn't really flow off the tongue, does it? You're going to answer this question of what you want the audience to do, think, or know. You're going to answer that in 10 words or less. Answer that question in 10 words or less. The reason why you want to answer this question in 10 words or less is because that statement is going to be how you basically detoxify your speech. Just as a body detox cleanses your body of all the junk inside of it, a speech detox will cleanse your speech of all the junk that shouldn't be in there. you're going to have a central message with that summary. Any piece of content that you had in your brainstorm that doesn't fit that content, any content that you have that doesn't fit that central message doesn't go into your speech. Anything that you have that enhances that central message, that is definitely going to be in your speech. You're thinking about speech real estate, if you will, and you only want the most prime real estate in your speech. Therefore, you're going to use that central message throughout the entire speech creation and editing process. Now, when we look at DTOKS, that is actually on purpose. Even though, again, yes, detox sounds a lot better and it flows off the tongue, it is actually in order of priority. You don't want to have people doing thinking and knowing. I don't think you can make a summary that's going to include all of that in 10 words. If you can, then I bow to you. You are a master of words, more so than myself. But do is the highest priority because it is action. What do you want the audience to do by the time you're done speaking? Thinking is changing their mindset from one view to another. So what do you want them to think by the end? Knowing, you could argue that knowing is constant. You always have to know something. You have to know what to do in order to do it. You have to know what the view is in order to think it. However, there are some speeches where knowing is all that needs to happen. You're probably familiar with the FYI for your information, or FYIO for your information only, meaning that the only point in this is for me to pass along knowledge. There is nothing that you need to do because of it. Therefore, knowing is important, but you don't want to build a central message around knowing. The strongest actions are doing and thinking. Another way that you can approach detox is, what do you want the audience to do? Okay, in order for them to do that, how do they need to think? In order for them to think that, what do they need to know? You can use this as a way to facilitate your brainstorming session, or you can just use it as a way to further refine your central message. But detox is extremely important because this is where you are going to build that central message, and it is going to be the foundation of your speech. Now, when we go to the next step, step number 4, this is the actual writing process. This is step number 4, write a draft. Now, if you have ever created a speech before, you have this great speech in your mind. You can just see yourself on that stage, the World Championship of Public Speaking, and this speech is just getting all the laughs. It is getting all of the head nods and all of the accolades that you want. That is all in your head. But when you write it out, you look at that speech and you say, woo, this is not good. Your first draft is just that, a first draft. Very rarely, if ever, does anyone sit down in front of a blank page and then a couple hours later rise up with a masterpiece in their hands. Your first draft should be messy. You're going to use the rest of this process to edit and refine it. I never created a World Championship speech in one go. I never created a World Championship speech just by writing my first draft and then going with it. The championship speech is done in the process of refining. It's done in the editing process. So when you are looking at your speech and you're writing it out, do not set the expectation that you are going to hit it out of the park, have a home run on the first try. Aim for progress, not perfection. Now, there are some people who do not like the writing process, and I understand that. I do not like it either. There's nothing more infuriating than seeing a blank page. This is why the brainstorming step is so important, because it puts the ideas out beforehand, before there was any pressure to sit down and write a draft, now you have some content that you can potentially work with. Remember that the application that I told you before, Speechy, sometimes I will give myself a table topic prompt and I will talk for 2 minutes. Then when I'm done talking, I will literally copy and paste what I said into a Word document. Then I can start my editing process, because to me, that is my first draft. Obviously, if you want to do more, you can do 5 minutes to talk. You can do 7 minutes to talk. You can do an hour to talk. The best thing about Speechy is that there is no limits. The only thing you have to worry about is your battery life on your phone. Now, when I'm done writing my speech, I then can kickstart the editing process. And the editing process starts with recording yourself reading that draft. Audio recording yourself reading that draft. The reason why I like to audio record myself reading my draft is because it allows me to, again, say the words out loud. It's starting the, what's the word that I want to use? Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It gets you in the process of internalizing your speech. When you write it, that's a form of internalization, but when you start speaking it as well, you start internalizing it. Now, a lot of people, they do not like this step. Why don't they like this step? Because they know the next step is right around the corner. Who wants to guess what the next step is? Just type it in. What do you think the next step is that people absolutely hate? Oh, no, not timing. Oh, Richard got it. Listening to yourself speak. The next step is listen to the recording. I actually know people who came up and told me, Aaron, yeah, I record my speeches all the time. And then I said the next logical question, how many times do you listen to it? They said, I understand it. Listening to your voice can be extremely hard. Just a quick yes or no. Who among us actually likes to listen to their own voice? Just a simple yes or no. Type it in the chat. A lot of no's very quickly. Well, a couple yeses. Okay, that's great. That's great. You are in rare company, or maybe you're just so experienced that you've just gotten used to it. Exactly. You don't mind it because you're used to it. Then somebody has the facepalm emoji. Yeah, I totally understand that. When it comes to listening to the sound of your voice, it is actually scientific why you do not like it. Going into a little bit of science lesson, it has everything to do with what is called conduction. There are two types of conduction. You have bone conduction and you have air conduction. Bone conduction is when the sound vibrates through your bones and the flesh in your body and reaches your ear that way. Air conduction is how you are hearing me right now. The sound waves are coming through the air and they're reaching your ears. The differences between bone conduction and air conduction is the types of frequencies that travel best through them. Bone conduction, the lower frequencies travel best this way. They tend to fall when they travel through the air. This is why people who have a lower voice have to project a little bit louder, because their deep voice doesn't always go out as far as others. Higher frequencies love the air. They travel great through the air, but since the higher frequencies are so used to traveling out, they don't travel well through the bones. When you hear yourself on recording, you're hearing yourself through air conduction. When you hear yourself as you talk, you're hearing yourself primarily through bone conduction, meaning that you're hearing a different sound. You don't like the sound of your voice, not because it's bad, or at least not mainly because it's bad, but because it sounds different. But just know that the voice that you hear on that recording is about the voice that I would hear if you were talking to me directly. So do not be afraid of your voice. Make sure that you listen to your recording, because this is the best part of the editing process. It's the most important piece of the editing process, because you can be your own evaluator. You can listen to yourself and say, you know what? I don't like the way I said that. I'm going to change some words around, or I think that this point is redundant. I don't need to say it again. Just as you have that speech in your head that doesn't look that good in writing, there are some times when you have something that looks really good in writing, but it's not that good when you actually say it out loud. Therefore, you will hear that, you will be able to change it, then you can listen to it again. Which leads me to the next step, which is rewrite, record, re-listen, repeat. Rewrite, record, re-listen, repeat. Rewrite, record, re-listen, repeat. I think you get the idea. You're basically going to do the last 3 steps over and over and over again. After you're done listening to your speech, you should have a list of things that you want to improve upon. It could be a line, it could be a certain word, it can be an entire section of your speech. You will take your personal feedback and you will apply it to your next draft. Once you are done that draft, you are going to record yourself listening to that draft again. Then you are going to listen to that and you're going to repeat that cycle over and over until you get to a point where you cannot find anything else wrong with your speech. When you get to that point, when you get to a point where you say, I don't know what else I can possibly change, I think I've reached the limit of what I can do, then you're ready to go to the next step. The next step is to videotape in front of a live studio audience. Videotape in front of a live studio audience. Obviously, it's going to be harder to come across a live audience that you're speaking on a stage and they're sitting in the audience at this point in time, but you can still use platforms like Zoom to speak to an audience and record yourself as you are speaking to them. The benefits of video recording is to watch yourself on stage to see your physical mannerisms. What are you doing with your body? What are you doing on stage at that time when you get a certain audience reaction? You're able to sync up your physical actions to the audience reaction. You're able to sync your words or measure the effect of your words due to the audience's reaction. On top of that, you can still listen to yourself and you can still edit that way. But this time, you're really looking at your body language. You're seeing what you can do on stage that may be beneficial or not beneficial. For instance, there are times where you are speaking and then all of a sudden you get a laugh. You weren't expecting this laugh. You don't know why they laughed. But then when you look at the video, you see that you are making a certain facial expression. You can test it out again on another audience with that same facial expression. And if you get the same reaction, you know that you're onto something. That's something that you can put into your ultimate speech. This is a technique that comedians have been using for ages. They will go to different comedy clubs and they will test out certain routines. They will test out certain body language, and they will always make sure, if they can, to video record themselves doing it. Moving on to the next step. This is about feedback. Apply feedback with caution. Apply feedback with caution. We are in Toastmasters, and how many of us, this is a new question that I've actually never asked before. How many of us actually like to give feedback? And be honest, if you love giving feedback, then feel free to just say yes. Yes, you like it. I also like giving feedback. I love giving feedback. And of course, there are people who don't feel comfortable giving feedback, and that's perfectly fine. But I do see I had a lot of yeses there. Now, how many of us like to receive feedback? How many of us like to receive feedback? I am actually shocked by this, about how so many people are saying yes, they love to receive feedback. And probably that's because we as Toastmasters have gotten so tuned to the importance of feedback that we don't really see it as a bad thing. But I'm going to be honest with you. I hate feedback. I do not like feedback. I look at my speeches like my children. I work very hard on my speeches. And how dare you tell me that my children are not perfect in every single way? That is my emotion speaking. When you are applying feedback, it is important to get the emotions out of it as fast as you possibly can so that you can think about the feedback objectively. But also keep in mind that just because you receive feedback doesn't mean you have to apply every single piece of feedback. If you try to apply every single piece of feedback that everybody gives you, you're going to end up with a very mediocre speech at best. You cannot please everybody all the time. There are going to be some people who think that the I had a dream speech could have been improved. Just because they're so attuned to giving feedback, it doesn't mean that it wasn't a great speech. Obviously, that was a historical speech. So just because you receive feedback doesn't always mean that you have to take it. So then how can you take the feedback that you need? How do you know what type of feedback you can use in your speech? I use what I call a feedback filter. So this will help me determine what type of speech feedback that I will include in my speeches. There are a lot of feedback filters that I use, but I'll give you some of the primary ones. One I already alluded to, and that is time. Allow time to pass. That way you can get the emotion out of your feedback that you received and then think about it objectively. Example of this is my 2019 World Championship speech. Elizabeth mentioned in 2016, I gave a long title for my speech. I was thinking about doing something similar in the 2019 speech, but it was only going to be 10 words. And I thought that it was going to be great. I would make a joke about it in my speech that I didn't do 57, that I had 10. Somebody gave me some feedback and said, Aaron, I know you want to do this longer speech, but that's not enough contrast between what you have done in the past. When I heard that feedback, I did not like it. I said, oh, but I know what I'm doing. I've been on the world stage before. You've never been on the world stage before. I'm going to do what I want to do. But that was my emotion speaking. I allowed myself to sit back, allow time to pass, and then I thought about it objectively. And when I thought about it objectively, that's when I realized, you know what? She's right. I need to make sure that I have enough contrast from what I did in the past because I don't want people to think about the past. I want them to think about me on stage in 2019, which caused me to make my speech title what it was, 3 words long. And I still was able to use my joke, and it worked even better than I thought it would have had if I had used 10 words. But that was just allowing time to pass. So time is the first feedback filter. The second feedback filter is your own intuition. A lot of people will receive feedback, especially in the beginning when they're not as experienced, and they'll just try to apply everything. But as you learn more, you'll learn that you have a certain style. And when you have a style, when you have a certain way of speaking, somebody can give you feedback that is just totally different from how you are normally speaking. You feel that it's going to disrupt not only your style, but the speech that you're actually trying to tell. Trust your own intuition. If you're not comfortable receiving feedback or applying feedback, you don't have to apply it. Only apply what you can understand. I always tell people, never apply feedback that I may give you if you do not understand it. Only apply feedback that you understand. It doesn't mean that my feedback isn't valid. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person for not following that feedback. It means that maybe you're just not ready to receive that lesson. This happened for me. There were pieces of feedback that I received years before I actually applied them because I didn't understand them until that time. Now, another feedback filter that I most commonly use is what I call my circle of counsel. This is a group of people who I entrust, who I believe will give me the best feedback and will do so objectively. In my speeches, I consider myself to be the judge, the jury, and if need be, the executioner. Everyone else is just a lawyer trying to present their case. My circle of counsel, however, I will give them similar authority over my speech, but they have to be people that you really trust. And they can have different jobs. My circle of counsel included my mentor, Dilababe Sekara, my mother, and my sister. The job of Dilababe Sekara was to make sure that I was staying within the fundamentals, that I had a proper speech and had a proper story. His job was not the same as my mother and my sister's. My mother and my sister's job was to tell me if I was being authentic on stage. If the Aaron Beverly that they spoke with every day was the same one that they saw on that stage. That was their role. Your circle of counsel can have different roles. They can have different purposes, but there are people that you can trust that when they say something, you apply it. The last feedback filter that I'll give you, and this one is really good as well, is what I call my bothers me list. As I give my speech, I will make a list of things that just bother me. Now, they can be minute, but they just bother me. Alone, these mean nothing. However, if I give my speech, somebody comes up to me afterwards, even if they're not in my circle of counsel, they tell me something that is on my list, I will make that change because not only did I notice it, somebody else noticed it in the audience. So the fact that it bothered me was valid, and that will prompt me to make a change. So these are just some of the few feedback filters that I use. You can use those as you are crafting your speech and receiving feedback and editing your speech based off of that feedback. The last step, step number 10 is set a cutoff date. Set a cutoff date, and this is really easy to miss, but it is very important. There are some people who will make changes at the last moment. You can do this, and there are occasions when you have to do it, especially if you're in a situation where you have to correct some information last minute, but try to avoid it as much as possible. I always say that at least be prepared 2 days before your presentation. For my 2019 speech, I was ready 2 weeks before the convention even started, where I locked down my speeches. I said, no more editing. I'm just going to focus on the next step. And that step is internalize the message and get ready. If you follow this process, you should have a quality audio recording. Honestly, you should have several audio recordings at this point. And you should have a valid or a usable video recording that you can watch over and over again. And the audio recording, you can listen to it over and over again. Have you ever had a song that you just couldn't get out of your head, or you have that favorite song that you know every single word to? You can internalize your speech the same way. Listen to it over and over and over again so that when you get on stage, your brain doesn't have to work as hard to recall the information. That is my favorite way to practice. I view practicing as internalization, not just the recitation of my speech. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the process. That is the process that I used when I became the second place winner in the international speech contest. It's the same process that I used when I became the world champion of public speaking. It's the same process that I used to create this presentation today. However, as I said before, the process is never fully 100% complete. There's always more that you can do. I advise you to take the pieces in this process and create your own processes, refine them, build them, do what you feel comfortable doing. This is my process. However, you have your own process. There is no such thing as the way. There is only a way. And it is up to you to find your way. Find your way, find your process, and you will find that you will exponentially grow as a speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. I took lots of notes. Just to let you know. Thank you so much, Aaron. It's been amazing. It's now time to give the stage to our chat master. He's our wizard of the chat, Steve Campion. I'm sure we have loads of questions for you. Thank you so much. Steve Campion, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Gaia, and thank you very much, Aaron, for your wonderful 11-step process and sharing so much information with us. Unsurprisingly, we've had a steady stream of questions, and they're on a variety of topics, so I'm conscious we might not cover them all. So thank you to everyone who has sent in questions, and Aaron, afterwards we might contact you and try and get some more nuggets of information from you. If I may, the questions really are falling into about 3 different categories. One of them is about what you shared with us with the 11-step process, questions related to that. We have a few questions related to your experience in the World Championship of Public Speaking, unsurprisingly, and then quite a few questions about your own personal journey that we'd love you to share a bit more with us.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll go straight in with the first one. One of them was, I think it was in step 7, you said record it on audio, and then step 8, the scary thing of listening to yourself. With new technology, what's your view on recording video at that stage for your own practice?
Recording video on that stage can be important because you can still look at your body language. But for me, that part was more so, the audio was more important for me at that step because I always viewed it as, I don't know what the stage is going to look like at a certain level of the contest. So I don't know what my stage is going to look like. So I can't prepare too much for my body language or how I'm going to use the stage at that point because I don't know what the stage is going to be. Now, you can still do that at that stage. Like I said, you find your own process. I think it can still be valuable, but I looked at it as I want to build the content first before I start worrying about the physical body language and staging part.
Thank you. Very, very useful point. Thank you. And then another topic related to the steps is the brainstorming step, the coming up with the speech ideas. I'm sure you come up with a lot of different speech ideas. So how do you decide what speech you want to take forward from a competition perspective?
Yeah. That one is more so, how much content do you have? Do you have a complete speech? If you have a bunch of ideas, but you can't find a way to piece them together, that's not a complete speech. But if you have an idea and you think, okay, I have a few stories that will tie in here, and now I just need to make an opening and conclusion, that's more of a complete speech idea. So you have your brainstorming session to just flood yourself with the ideas, and then you can start to pick out what can actually be turned into a speech. Now, there are some people who are thinking about, okay, should I go with this speech or this other speech for the speech contest? If you're ever having that dilemma, the first question you need to ask yourself is, which speech is actually complete? If you have one that's really great, but it's not complete, an incomplete speech isn't going to help you in the contest. Only the complete one is. So until you finish that better idea for a speech, you have to go with what's complete. That's the first question you should ask. The next question you should ask yourself is, which one do I think is more valuable to the audience? Or which one do I feel is better? And you just have to go with your gut.
Thank you. Thank you. And then related to the development of the speech and the content of the speech, how important do you feel it is to have laughter in the speech or jokes or humor elements in there?
Yes. People tend to think that you absolutely 100% need humor. That's not always true. The reason why a lot of people use humor is because it's a great way to connect people together. But there are other emotions that you can tap into as you are speaking. Now, I personally like to use laughter more because I don't want people to have negative connotations linked to my speech. So you'll very rarely hear me give a speech that is going to be targeted around emotions like anger or fear. I don't like to use those emotions, but there are other emotions in the emotional spectrum. Like I just said, it's a spectrum. So you have different options, but humor is a great way and a safe way to engage with people. I take that safe way with a grain of salt because every type of humor isn't safe.
I think that's very true. I think, and once again, back to your point about know the audience you mentioned earlier about traveling to Dubai and understanding what would work there can be quite different. So thank you.
Exactly.
And then moving on to the topics of the experience in the World Championship of Public Speaking, is there anything that you would have done differently if you were competing online? We're all competing online now. So is there anything that you would do differently, or how would you approach that?
Yes. For this one, I actually thought about this last year when it was online for the first time, and I released a video out on YouTube, which I guess is a great time to plug my YouTube channel, Aaron W. Beverly. You can go onto YouTube, you can like the videos and subscribe. I will be releasing a lot more content this year. It's starting with content around the contest, but just shortly, I talked about different things that you have to think about when you are competing virtually on a video camera. For instance, your stage is a lot smaller now. Before, you had a stage that was wide and you had to make sure that you stayed in that speaking area. Well, guess what? My speaking area is now this box. If I go too far this way, you can't see me, and you're probably going to have a little bit more trouble hearing me because I'm away from the mic. So you have to think about that now. One thing that I did notice in the International Speech Contest last year, which is something that I wasn't too sure about, was using the depth of the stage. So instead of going left to right or left to right, you were now going front to back. Mm-hmm. It was a different dynamic that I usually don't play around with depth of the stage when I'm on a physical stage, but on a virtual stage, it becomes more important. So those are the main two things that I would tell you about, is just that your stage is a lot smaller and play with the depth of the stage.
Thank you. And I'm conscious we're a little over time, but maybe if I can be cheeky and ask you one more question, which is, what was the major influence for you in wanting to be the winner of the World Championship of Public Speaking?
It changed over time. In 2012, I wanted to win the World Championship of Public Speaking because I wanted the fame and the glory. I thought that I was going to be a millionaire. I thought that I was going to be invited by celebrities to hang out. I was going to be interviewed by Oprah. It was going to be great. Now, I'm the world champion right now. I have not been invited to any celebrity parties. I have not been invited for an interview with Oprah. I am not a millionaire. But everybody who has had success after the World Championship of Public Speaking has that success because they worked hard after they won the World Championship of Public Speaking. That's something that I learned over time. Therefore, my motivation started to change. I started to want to enter the speech contest because I noticed that I was improving every single year. Then I made one final adjustment where I said, you know what? I'm not even going to make it my goal to win. I'm going to make my goal to grow. It was just an outright goal. I didn't write down in my New Year's resolutions or my New Year's goals that I was going to be the 2019 World Champion of Public Speaking. The 1 year that I did not do that, the 1 year where I made it about growth, that's the year that I won the World Championship of Public Speaking.
Thank you very much, Aaron. I think that's a great message for everyone to take away. It's all about the process as much as the result. So thank you. I'm sorry that I was a poor substitute for Oprah, but I'm sure you'll be on there soon. Thank you again. We have loads of questions we'd love to ask. We could go on all evening, but I'd now like to hand over to Daniel Sanders to wrap up. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Daniel, where are you?
Yes, good evening, Aaron, and thank you very much for your time tonight. This has been a truly inspiring talk. There's lots I've taken away from it, and that note that you closed on that fundamental difference between setting your goal to grow rather than setting your goal to win, moving from an open statement to a closed statement. That's really sort of important. That open-ended commitment to the process is so important to all of us, rather than just the closed point win. That's really good. And some of the other ideas I really picked up that I like your detox filter to really boil the speech down to its bones before you start to build it up. And I really like the way that you were very vulnerable and very human and pointing out to the bits that not many people like at all, like getting the feedback and having to shoot your children and things like that. And I really do appreciate the fact that you put together your way of filtering that feedback so that feedback was effective. And it is all too true. If you averaged out everyone's opinions, you would end up with probably the lowest common denominator of a speech that existed in the world. And so there's lots and lots of really useful nuggets in, and the district and all of our international guests that I can see here and my colleagues. There's so many messages that we can take forward in our own personal growth, and of course into the next round of the international speech contest that is beginning to kick off around the world. So thank you very much. It's invaluable stuff, and I've really appreciated what you've contributed both at a personal level and in my role as Programme Quality Director. I'd like to take a moment to thank Elizabeth Jordan, the Public Relations Manager, for spearheading this really useful district webinar series that we're having. We're bringing in top international contributors from around the world. We've had the two most recent World Champions of Public Speakers addresses, so there's a good top deck there, Elizabeth. And none of this is possible without the hard work and commitment of the Zoom team, who are too numerous to mention today and seeing them around the place. And they're a tremendous asset to our district that enable us to really enjoyably put this kind of material together. And when we all meet in face-to-face, let's all save up for a huge round and congratulate each other on the year that we've come through. Well, more than a year now. Thank you very much. Now handing the initiative back to the next person. Is that Gaia?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. And thank you to everyone, especially Aaron. Thank you for that. Thank you to all my colleagues tonight. Thank you to the district leadership team behind the scenes. Thank you, guests. Thank you to who joined us tonight from the other side of the world. So it's time now to wrap up, to finish our Sunday webinars. Please stay tuned because we are going to have more this year, this 2021. We are looking forward for that, and we are going to keep you posted. So now it's time to say goodbye. Ciao, arrivederci. Thank you.